The Star Wind glided through the dark void of space, its engines humming softly as it traveled toward the distant planet. The crew aboard the ship was excited, filled with eager anticipation. For weeks, they had followed the ancient map, one that had been uncovered by an earlier expedition. The promise of wealth and powerful technology awaited them on this uncharted world. Ancient alien artifacts, lost knowledge, and unimaginable riches lay just beyond the reach of their hands. Derek Mitchell, an engineer aboard the ship, had joined the crew because of his skills in fixing complex systems. He was an ordinary man in an extraordinary situation, but he had never been one to seek the spotlight. He preferred to keep to himself, working behind the scenes to ensure the ship ran smoothly. He wasn't interested in treasure or power. He was here to do his job and get back home. The Star Wind landed softly on the lush surface of the alien planet, its sleek design blending with the green flora of the unknown world. The crew disembarked, each of them eager to explore and collect the wealth they had been promised. Derek, however, stayed behind on the ship, inspecting the engines, ensuring everything was ready for the return journey. He didn't have the same excitement as the others, but he couldn't deny the sense of curiosity that stirred in him as he listened to the crew's chatter. The planet was beautiful. Towering trees stretched into the sky, their leaves shimmering in strange hues of blue and purple. The air was thick with the scent of alien flowers, and the ground seemed to pulse with energy. But amidst the beauty, there was something unsettling about the silence of the land. The crew hadn't encountered any signs of life yet, but they remained hopeful that they would soon meet the inhabitants of this planet. It didn't take long for them to find the entrance to an ancient city. The massive stone gates stood tall, covered in vines and markings that no one could understand. The crew had never seen anything like it before, and they were filled with awe and wonder. As they walked through the towering gates, the ruins of the city revealed themselves. Grandeur now faded into ruin. But there was something mysterious about the place, something that told them this was no ordinary civilization. As they ventured deeper into the city, the crew felt the weight of history press down on them. It was as though they had stumbled upon something far greater than they had expected, something that could change the course of history. But they had no idea how right they were. The queen of the alien world, a being of untold beauty and strength, awaited them at the center of the city. Her palace was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. An impressive structure, glowing with an ethereal light. She was tall, with skin the color of moonlight and eyes that shimmered like stars. The crew approached cautiously, but the queen's presence commanded their attention. She radiated power and grace, and yet there was a sadness in her gaze. "We have come to seek the treasure," the captain of the Star Wind spoke, his voice steady, though there was a hint of awe. "We wish to trade with your people." The queen studied them for a long moment, her eyes shifting from one face to the next, before her gaze landed on Derek. The others didn't notice at first, but Derek felt the weight of her stare, piercing through him like a beam of light. His heart raced, his palms suddenly sweaty. He shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to do. The queen stepped forward, her voice soft yet commanding, as she raised one elegant finger to point directly at him. "I want him," she said simply. The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. The crew froze, their eyes darting between Derek and the queen. Derek felt a chill crawl down his spine as the realization of her words sank in. She had chosen him. The captain's voice broke the silence. "Excuse me, Your Highness, but there seems to be some misunderstanding. We came here for the treasure." "Why him?" The queen's gaze never left Derek. "He is the one I need. He is the key." The crew exchanged confused glances, but no one dared question the queen further. Derek, still stunned, looked to his crewmates for guidance, but they were as uncertain as he was. The situation had suddenly turned strange. and Derek couldn't understand why he had been singled out. The queen turned and beckoned to her guards, who stepped forward and motioned for Derek to follow. "Come," she said, her voice almost a whisper now. "The time has come for you to fulfill your role." Derek hesitated for a moment, his thoughts racing. He never asked for any of this. He didn't know what role he was supposed to play, but he had no choice but to follow. As he walked toward the Queen's palace, the eyes of the crew followed him, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. No one knew what would happen next, but Derek was about to find out. He stepped inside the palace, the massive doors closing behind him with a soft, almost inaudible thud. The Queen was already waiting for him, her eyes focused on him with a look that was both gentle and intense. "You don't understand yet," she said, her voice low. "But you will." Derek opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Something about her presence made him feel both small and important at the same time. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew that his life was about to change forever. Derek sat in a large chamber within the alien queen's palace, his hands resting on his lap as he tried to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. The crew had followed him inside, though they weren't allowed to step beyond the threshold. They remained in the main hall, unsure of what was happening. Derek, however, had been escorted to a private chamber where the queen awaited him. Leora, the alien queen, stood by a large window, her back to him. Outside, the world stretched far beyond the palace walls, a vast city filled with ancient ruins and strange creatures that roamed freely. The view was breathtaking, but Derek couldn't focus on the beauty. His mind was still racing, trying to make sense of everything. "Why me?" Derek finally asked, his voice steady but filled with confusion. "You pointed at me, but I don't understand. Why did you choose me?" Leora turned slowly, her gaze fixed on Derek. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable power. "You are the one I need," she said simply. "You are the key to something much bigger than either of us." Derek's mind spun. "A key? To what?" "To the future," she replied, walking toward him with slow, deliberate steps. "My people have been searching for a human like you for centuries. The prophecy speaks of one who would come, someone who would awaken my true potential. You are that person, Derek Mitchell." He felt a chill run down his spine. "A prophecy? What does that mean?" Leora paused before answering, her eyes searching Derek's face as if she were weighing something deep within. "I am the last of my kind," she said quietly. "The people of my world are dying. Our civilization is crumbling because our queen, the one who holds the power to heal and restore us, has lost her strength. But there is a prophecy that speaks of a human who will awaken the dormant power within me." Derek swallowed hard. "But how? I'm just an engineer. I don't have any special abilities. I'm just a man." Leora's gaze softened, but her resolve remained strong. "You may not understand it now, but your presence here has triggered something within me. There is a bond between humans and my kind that has long been forgotten. You are more important than you realize, Derek. You are the one who will help me find the strength I need." Derek couldn't quite grasp what she was saying. He was just a regular man, far from anything special. But here he was, standing in front of an alien queen who claimed he held the key to saving her entire world. He felt lost, but he also felt a strange sense of responsibility settle over him. He had to know more. "What is it that you need me to do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "How can I help you?" Leora took another step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "You must come with me, Derek. You must stand by my side as I reclaim my rightful place as ruler. But it's more than that. You must help me unlock the power that is buried within me." Only through our connection can we restore what has been lost. Derek blinked, trying to make sense of it. How do I unlock your power? Leora smiled, faintly. The power is awakened through a bond, one that can only be forged between us. It is not just physical, but mental and emotional. It is through you, Derek, that I will be able to fully access the strength that I need to save my people. Derek felt a strange, almost electric sensation run through his body at her words. It was as if something deep inside him was stirring, though he didn't know what it meant. He shook his head, trying to focus. I don't know if I can do what you're asking. This is too much. I'm not some chosen one. I don't even know how to help. Leora's expression softened, her gaze growing gentler. I understand your fear, she said quietly. This is not an easy path, and I do not ask it lightly. But there is no other choice. I need you, Derek. Without you, my people will continue to suffer. Without you, my power will remain dormant, and the future of my world will be lost. Derek felt the weight of her words press on him, and for the first time since this all began, he truly understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about him. It was about an entire civilization. The fate of Leora's people rested on his shoulders. He let out a long breath, the reality of it all slowly settling in. What do you need me to do? Leora stepped forward, her hand gently touching his arm. Derek froze, not sure how to react to her closeness. She looked into his eyes, her expression filled with a quiet determination. Come with me, she said softly. Let me show you. Derek hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. If there was any chance of helping, he had to see it through. The weight of the unknown loomed before him, but he couldn't turn away. Not now. She led him down a long corridor, her hand still resting lightly on his arm. The palace felt like it stretched endlessly, its smooth walls and intricate designs unlike anything he had ever seen before. Every step they took echoed through the silent halls, and as they walked, Derek couldn't help but feel as if they were walking toward something monumental, something that could change everything. They reached a large chamber at the heart of the palace, the air thick with an energy that Derek couldn't explain. Leora stopped in the center of the room and turned to face him. This is where it begins, she said. This is where we unlock the bond. Derek stood still, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what was coming next, but there was no turning back now. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on Leora's as she raised her hands. The air around them seemed to crackle with energy, and Derek felt a pulse, like a wave passing through him. It was as if something deep inside him was being awakened. Leora's eyes glowed with an intensity he had never seen before. I am ready, she said softly. Derek took a deep breath and nodded. As their hands met, a surge of energy coursed through them both. It was a feeling like no other, a deep, resonant connection that felt as though it reached the very core of his being. Derek had no idea what was happening, but in that moment, he knew something had changed forever. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. Derek's life had shifted in ways he never could have imagined. He had been thrust into a world beyond comprehension, surrounded by ancient alien technology, prophecies, and a queen who claimed that his presence was the key to saving her people. Though Derek had agreed to help Leora, the bond they had begun to form felt heavy. The connection between them was undeniable, but it also filled him with an unease he couldn't shake. Every time they spoke, every time they shared a moment, there was a power he couldn't control, a power that seemed to grow with each passing day. Leora was changing too. Her once calm demeanor was now often replaced with flashes of uncertainty and urgency. She could feel the power building inside her, but it was not yet fully awakened. She needed Derek's presence to complete the process. But the more she relied on him, the more her control over the situation seemed to slip. They spent long hours together in the palace's vast inner chambers, where Leora practiced controlling her abilities. Derek would watch her, unsure of what his role was in this strange process. He had never asked to be part of this. He was just an engineer, a man who had come to explore a distant world. Now, he found himself at the center of a power struggle, caught between a queen's desperate need and his own growing fear. One evening, as the sun set behind the alien city, casting the palace in golden light, Leora took a seat beside him in one of the many gardens of the palace. The air was warm, and the scent of alien flowers filled the air, but the tension between them was palpable. "I feel it growing stronger," Leora said, her voice softer than usual. "The power is coming alive within me, but it's not as simple as I thought. The bond we share, it's not just a connection, it's a force I can't control." Derek looked at her, concern etched on his face. "What do you mean you can't control it?" "I can feel it inside me," Leora continued, her eyes focused on the distant horizon. "A power that's both thrilling and terrifying. It's growing stronger with every moment, and it's pulling us both into something I don't fully understand. If I lose control, I'm afraid it will consume both of us." Derek frowned. "But you said I could help you. You said the prophecy spoke of me." Leora turned her gaze to him, her eyes filled with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You are the key, Derek. But that key is unlocking something that may be more dangerous than we thought. This power. It's not just about saving my people. It's about power on a scale you can't even begin to comprehend. And I'm afraid that if I don't learn to control it soon, it will tear us apart." Derek's heart raced. He had thought helping Leora was the right thing to do. He had thought he could make a difference. But now, he felt as though he was being pulled into something that was far beyond him, something he wasn't sure he could handle. "Is there any way to stop it?" he asked, his voice tight. Leora shook her head, her expression sad. "I don't know, but I don't have time to figure it out. The forces that have been watching me, they are growing impatient. If I can't unlock my full potential soon, my enemies will take advantage of it. And they won't stop until they control this power for themselves." Derek felt a surge of uncertainty. He had no idea what enemies Leora was talking about, but he knew that the stakes were much higher than he had realized. The alien queen had trusted him, but was he really ready to handle the responsibility she had placed on his shoulders? The weight of it was almost too much to bear. "You can't do this alone," Derek said quietly, standing up and turning to face her. "I'll help you, but we need to figure out how to control this power before it controls us." Leora stood, as well, her expression softening. "I'm not sure how we can do that, but I promise, I will not let you bear the weight of this alone. We will face this together." As she spoke, Derek could see the conflict in her eyes. He knew she was struggling, torn between her need for him and the fear of losing control. He couldn't help but wonder if they were both in over their heads. The next few days were filled with attempts to understand the power that was awakening within Leora. They spent hours in the palace's hidden chambers, where Leora's ancestors had stored ancient knowledge, books, relics, and scrolls that detailed the history of her people. Derek found himself poring over these materials, trying to learn anything that could help them. But every answer they found only seemed to raise more questions. Leora's power was tied to the planet itself, its energy, its life force. She had once been the beacon of her people's strength, but that power had faded over time. Only through the awakening of the ancient bond could she restore her people's legacy. But every time they tried to tap into that power, it seemed to grow more unstable, more unpredictable. It was during one of their many attempts to understand the ancient texts that they uncovered something unsettling. Hidden among the records, they found a prophecy that had been long forgotten. one that spoke of a chosen human who would come to awaken the queen's power. But the prophecy also warned of a great cost. The awakening of this power would not only change the queen's destiny, it would change the humans as well. Derek's heart sank as he read the words aloud. The human who awakens the queen's power will be forever bound to her. They will lose themselves in the process, their identity fading until only the queen remains. There is no turning back. Leora's face went pale as she listened to the prophecy. "I never knew," she whispered. "I never understood the true cost of this bond. If you help me, Derek, you will lose everything. You will be part of me, completely." Derek felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The warning was clear. No matter how much he helped, no matter how much he cared for Leora, the cost would be more than he could bear. And yet, as he looked into her eyes, he knew he couldn't turn back. Now, his life was already intertwined with hers in ways he couldn't explain. But the question still remained. How would they control the power that was growing stronger every day? Could they find a way to save her people without sacrificing everything? They had. The struggle for control had only just begun, and Derek knew that the path ahead would be far more dangerous than anything he could have imagined. The days following the discovery of the prophecy were filled with a new sense of urgency. Derek and Leora had hoped that understanding the ancient texts would give them the answers they so desperately needed. But instead, the knowledge only seemed to deepen the mystery surrounding their bond. Leora's powers continued to grow, her abilities becoming more unpredictable with every passing day. Despite her determination to master them, it was clear that she was still struggling to maintain control. Derek, too, found himself caught between his loyalty to her and the fear of losing himself in the process. He had never signed up for this, had never imagined he would become the center of an intergalactic struggle. But as the days passed, he began to realize that there was no turning back. He had been chosen, and whether he liked it or not, he was bound to Leora in ways he couldn't fully understand. It wasn't just the power that was becoming a threat. As the Queen's strength grew, so did the attention from other forces. There were whispers in the galaxy of the rising power of the alien Queen, and not all of them were friendly. Derek began to see how much danger Leora was in, and how much more dangerous things could become for both of them. One afternoon, as Derek stood by one of the grand windows in the palace, he gazed out over the city below. The landscape was peaceful, but there was an unsettling feeling in the air. The sounds of the alien world, birds chirping, leaves rustling, seemed distant. He couldn't shake the sense that something was coming, something he couldn't prepare for. Suddenly, Leora entered the room. She moved silently, but Derek could feel her presence as she approached. Her face was pale, her eyes dark with worry. She stood beside him and looked out the window, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "They're coming," Leora said softly, her voice tinged with a sense of fear she had rarely shown. "Who?" Derek asked, turning to face her. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers clenched at her sides. "The ones who seek to control me," Leora replied, her voice strained. "They've known about my power for a long time. They've been waiting for me to awaken it fully, but now that they see it growing stronger, they're preparing to act." Derek's heart skipped a beat. "Who are they? What do they want with you?" Leora's eyes darkened with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "They are the rulers of the galaxy, the ones who have long held power over my people. They do not want me to rise again. They fear that my power, combined with yours, will threaten their reign." Derek's mind raced. He had thought the dangers they faced were only internal, that they were battling with the awakening of her power. But now, it seemed that their enemies were closing in from all sides. "Are they here already?" Derek asked, his voice tightening with concern. Leora nodded. "Yes. Their ships are already in orbit above the planet. They're waiting for the right moment to strike. Derek felt a chill run down his spine. He hadn't prepared for this. He had come to this planet looking for answers, not to become a pawn in a galactic struggle. But as he looked into Leora's eyes, he knew there was no choice. They had to fight back. "We can't let them take you," Derek said firmly, his hand instinctively reaching for hers. "We need to figure out how to stop them." Leora turned to him, her expression softening. "I've been trying to keep you out of this, Derek. You didn't ask for any of this. But now, I don't have a choice. They won't stop until they have what they want." Derek squeezed her hand, determination rising within him. "We'll stop them together. Whatever it takes." Leora nodded slowly, her eyes flickering with a mixture of fear and trust. "I'm not sure how we can do this. My power is growing, but it's not enough. I'm not fully in control yet. But with your help, we may stand a chance." The two of them spent the rest of the day preparing, though there wasn't much they could do. Leora's palace was already heavily guarded, but Derek knew that wouldn't be enough. The enemies who were coming weren't just ordinary soldiers. They were elites, trained in the art of war and manipulation. They would stop at nothing to claim Leora's power for themselves. As night fell, the tension in the palace became almost suffocating. Derek and Leora stayed close, discussing their plan of action in hushed voices. The sounds of distant ships echoed in the sky, a constant reminder of the approaching threat. Hours passed, and the night sky grew darker. Derek had barely slept, his mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. He had never been in a battle like this before. He wasn't a soldier, wasn't trained for combat. He was just an engineer who had found himself at the center of a war he didn't fully understand. But as he looked at Leora, standing beside him in the dim light, he knew one thing for sure: he would fight for her people, and for the future they both hoped to build. There was no going back now. The battle was coming, and it would either tear them apart or bring them closer together. Leora's voice broke the silence. "We have to move quickly. They're preparing to land." Derek nodded. They had no time to waste. Together they gathered what little resources they had, preparing to face the oncoming enemy. They didn't know how they would defeat them, but they knew they couldn't let the enemy get any closer. Just as they were about to leave the chamber, a loud explosion shook the ground beneath their feet. The palace's walls trembled and the lights flickered. The enemy had arrived. Derek's heart pounded in his chest. It was happening. The battle had begun. Leora's eyes met his. "Stay close to me," she said softly. "Together we can do this." Derek nodded, determination in his eyes. The time had come to fight, not just for survival, but for the future of an entire galaxy. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they were ready to face whatever came next. The palace was alive with chaos. The once peaceful halls were now filled with the sound of alarms blaring, and the heavy thud of boots echoed from all directions as enemy forces closed in. Derek and Leora stood at the center of the large, ornate room, staring at each other as the reality of what was happening set in. The battle had begun, and the outcome would determine not just their fate, but the fate of her entire world. Leora's power had grown stronger since they had first begun their connection. But despite her strength, she still hadn't fully unlocked the potential she needed to defeat the approaching forces. Her abilities were unpredictable, and though she could feel the power coursing through her, it was like a fire waiting to explode. The connection between her and Derek had become even more vital, but it was also increasingly dangerous. "They're coming," Leora whispered, her eyes flashing with a mixture of fear and resolve. "I can feel them closing in." Derek, though, uncertain of what exactly was about to happen, stood by her side. He had come to realize that there was no turning back now. Whether he was ready or not, he had already made his choice. He would stand with Leora, no matter what. Together, they walked through the grand corridors of the palace, heading toward the control room. Leora had told him that there was a hidden chamber beneath the palace, one that contained the very essence of her people's power. It was a place that had been sealed away for centuries, but now it seemed to be their only hope. As they moved through the halls, Derek could feel the tension mounting. The enemy forces were closing in, and the air was thick with the sense of impending danger. It felt like everything was happening in slow motion, as though time itself was holding its breath. When they reached the control room, Leora's guards were already positioned, standing watch at the entrance. They saluted Leora, and without a word, they stepped aside to let her pass. The chamber was cold and dark, with glowing symbols etched into the walls. In the center of the room, a large stone pedestal stood, its surface cracked and weathered by time. The air hummed with energy, the same energy that had once been the source of her people's strength. "This is it," Leora said, her voice barely a whisper. "The heart of my people's power, the only place where I can truly awaken." Derek looked at her, his heart pounding. He didn't fully understand the significance of the pedestal or the energy surrounding them, but he trusted her. He had to. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice tight. Leora turned to him, her eyes glowing, with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "You must be with me, Derek. The bond between us is the key. You are the one who will help me unlock this power." Derek nodded, though uncertainty still weighed heavily on his chest. He wasn't a fighter or a leader, but in this moment he had no choice but to act. Leora raised her hands toward the pedestal, and the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter. The ground beneath them trembled, and a soft, otherworldly hum filled the room. The energy that had been dormant for so long was awakening. It was both beautiful and terrifying. "I can feel it," Leora whispered, her voice shaking slightly. "The power is almost within my grasp, but it's still not enough." Derek moved closer, his hand instinctively reaching out for hers. He didn't know what it was about their connection, but whenever they touched, the energy between them grew stronger. It was as though their bond was the missing piece. "Together," he said, his voice steady. "We'll do this together." Leora's gaze softened as she met his eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "together." As their hands touched, the energy in the room surged. It was like a wave of power that crashed over them both, filling the room with a bright light. Derek could feel it, the energy pouring into him, into Leora. It was overwhelming, and yet it felt like they were both becoming something more than they had ever been. Suddenly, a deafening crash shook the room, and the walls trembled. Derek and Leora broke their connection, turning toward the entrance. The enemy had breached the palace. "They're here," Leora said, her voice filled with determination. "But it's too late. The power is mine now, and with it, I will protect my people." Derek felt a surge of energy course through him, and for a moment he thought he might lose control. But Leora's presence grounded him, and together they moved toward the door. Outside, the enemy forces were flooding into the palace, their weapons raised and their voices shouting commands. But as they entered the control room, they were met with an unexpected sight. Leora stood tall, her arms raised, her eyes glowing with the energy of her people. The light that filled the room seemed to pulse with power, and the air crackled with the electricity of a force beyond anything they had ever seen. "You will not take this power," Leora said, her voice echoing in the room. It was no longer the voice of the vulnerable queen they had once known. It was the voice of something much greater, something unstoppable. The enemy soldiers froze, their eyes wide with fear. They had underestimated her, and now they were about to learn the cost of that mistake. Derek stood beside her, feeling the energy radiating from her. He could see the change in her, how the power had transformed her into something more than just a queen. She was a force in her own right, and together, They were an unstoppable force. The soldiers hesitated, their weapons still raised, but they no longer seemed as confident. Leora raised her hand, and with a single motion, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The soldiers stumbled, their weapons falling from their hands as they were pushed back by an invisible force. "Leave now," Leora commanded, her voice unwavering, "or face the consequences." Derek watched in awe as the soldiers turned and fled, scrambling to escape the power that now radiated from the Queen. It was clear they had no choice but to retreat. As the last of the enemy forces disappeared, Leora let her hand fall to her side. The room grew quiet once more, the energy still crackling in the air. Derek stood in stunned silence, unable to find the words to describe what he had just witnessed. Leora had done it. She had unlocked the full extent of her power, and together, they had defeated their enemies. But as he looked at her, he knew that their fight was far from over. The power they had unleashed was a force to be reckoned with, and there were still many battles to fight. The galaxy was changing, and Leora would lead her people into a new era, and Derek, he would stand by her side for as long as she needed him. The silence after the battle was almost deafening. The last of the enemy forces had fled, retreating from the power that Leora had unleashed. The control room, once filled with the noise of the enemy and the blaring alarms, was now still. Air hummed with a low, almost soothing energy, an energy that had once been dormant within Leora, now fully awakened. Derek stood beside her, his mind racing. He had watched in awe as Leora had commanded the energy, her power radiating out of her in a way that was both beautiful and terrifying. The enemy had underestimated her. They had thought they could come to her world, take what they wanted, and leave. But they had underestimated the bond between her and Derek, the power they could unlock together. As the final traces of the battle faded, Leora turned to Derek. Her face was softer now, the fierce energy from before slowly calming. The room no longer crackled with the intensity of the power she had just released. She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You did it," she said, her voice quiet, yet filled with strength. "We did it." Derek nodded, though he still felt overwhelmed by everything that had happened. He wasn't a soldier, and he hadn't been prepared for a battle of this magnitude, but somehow, together, they had done what no one else could. Leora took a deep breath, her gaze returning to the empty room. The threat was over, for now, but Derek knew there would always be more challenges ahead. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a new power, and it was only a matter of time before more enemies came. "We've won this battle," Leora continued, her voice steady. "But there will be others. There will always be those who want to take what we have. We have to be ready." Derek looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He had thought that once they defeated the enemy, they would be safe. But now he understood that the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "How do we prepare for what comes next?" Derek asked, his voice tinged with concern. He had never been a leader. He had never been involved in anything like this before. But now it seemed that his destiny was tied to Leora's. He couldn't walk away. Not now. Leora's gaze softened as she looked at him. "We rebuild," she said simply. "We rebuild and we unite. My people have suffered for so long. But with this power, we have a chance to create something new. A future where we are no longer afraid. A future where we stand together, not just as rulers, but as equals." Derek nodded slowly, taking in her words. It was clear to him now that Leora wasn't just a queen trying to save her people. She was someone with a vision of a better future. And somehow, that vision now included him. "We can do it," Derek said, his voice growing stronger. "Together." Leora smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Derek saw the true warmth in her eyes. It wasn't just gratitude or relief, it was hope. Hope for the future. Hope for her people. Hope for the galaxy. We can, she agreed. As the two of them stood there, the room growing quieter around them, Derek couldn't help but think of how far they had come. He had been just an engineer, a simple man who had never dreamed of adventure. But now, he was part of something much bigger. His life had changed in ways he could never have imagined, and though the journey ahead was uncertain, he knew he was not alone. Leora would lead her people, but Derek would stand beside her. They would face whatever came next. Together. The next few weeks were spent in a whirlwind of rebuilding. Leora's powers, now fully awakened, allowed her to communicate with her people in ways no one had ever imagined. She began to bring her world back to life, using the energy of the planet to heal the land and restore balance. Derek worked by her side, learning more about the culture of her people, the history of her world, and the deep connection they shared with the land. The more he learned, the more he understood how important his role was. He had become not just a partner to Leora, but a part of something much larger, a movement that could change the course of history. But even as they worked to rebuild, Derek could feel the eyes of the galaxy upon them. News of Leora's victory had spread quickly, and rumors of her power had begun to reach the ears of powerful factions. Some would see her as a threat. Some would try to undermine her. But Leora was no longer the queen she had been before. She had embraced her power, and with Derek at her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. One evening, as they stood together on the balcony of the palace, looking out over the now thriving city below, Derek couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The stars above were clear and bright, and the air was calm. For the first time in a long while, there was no threat looming over them. There was no battle to fight. There was only the quiet promise of what was to come. Leora stood beside him, her hand resting gently on the railing. She looked at him, her eyes filled with the weight of their journey. "Do you think we can really do it?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with a hint of doubt. Derek turned to her, his expression serious. "I know we can. We've already proven it. Together we're stronger than anything that comes our way." Leora smiled softly, her eyes filled with gratitude and love. "Together," she repeated. As they stood there side by side, Derek knew that the galaxy was about to change. The future was uncertain, but with Leora and their bond, he knew they could face anything. The power they had unleashed was a force that could bring both hope and destruction. But it was in their hands to shape it. And together they would shape it for good. The galaxy would never be the same again. And neither would they.